The human who survived. The battlefield was a graveyard of fire and ash. Massive ships hovered above, their shadows like death's embrace. On the surface of a barren planet, Dr. Sarah Lorne, the last surviving human medic, crouched behind a jagged rock. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps as she checked her dwindling supplies. Around her, the bodies of her fallen comrades lay cold and still. The war against the alien Zygorian Empire had been brutal, and today's battle was a crushing defeat for humanity. As Sarah scanned the horizon, a low rumble caught her attention. The ground trembled beneath her boots, signaling the approach of an alien patrol. She had no weapons, no allies, and nowhere to hide. Her mind raced, calculating her chances of survival. She knew one thing: surrender was her only option if she wanted to live. Taking a deep breath, Sarah stood, raising her hands above her head. The patrol was led by towering Zygorian soldiers, their blue skin shimmering under the twin suns. They were intimidating, with sharp armor and glowing weapons. At the center of the group was their leader, General Xylar, known across the galaxy as an unstoppable force. His piercing yellow eyes locked onto Sarah as the patrol surrounded her, a human survivor. Xylar's voice was cold and mechanical, amplified by the device on his armor. You must be either brave or foolish to reveal yourself. Sarah swallowed her fear. I'm a medic. I help, not fight. Xylar's gaze narrowed. Help. Humanity has done nothing but fight us at every turn. One of the soldiers stepped forward, raising a weapon toward her. We should eliminate her, General. She's a threat. Sarah's heart pounded, but she forced herself to stay calm. If you kill me, you lose the chance to understand your enemy. I can help you. For a moment, silence hung in the air. Xylar raised a hand, signaling the soldier to stand down. His interest was piqued. Very well, human. You'll come with us. But know this, if you try anything, you won't live to regret it. The soldiers bound Sarah's wrists and led her onto their ship. The Zygorian warship was a marvel of alien engineering, its hulls glowing with strange energy. As they marched her through, Sarah noticed injured Zygorians being carried on stretchers. Some moaned in pain, while others lay deathly still. It was a battlefield within a ship. Xylar halted and turned to Sarah. You claim to be a medic. Prove it. One of the soldiers brought forward a Zygorian warrior, his arm nearly severed from a recent skirmish. The alien was losing blood fast, and his breathing was shallow. Sarah hesitated. She didn't know Zygorian anatomy, but she couldn't show weakness. Untie me, she demanded. If you want me to save him, I need my hands. The soldiers looked to Xylar, who gave a curt nod. They released her bonds, and Sarah quickly dropped to her knees beside the injured alien. She assessed the wound, her hands moving with practiced precision. The tools she carried were primitive by Zygorian standards, but she improvised, using a heat tool from a nearby station to cauterize the wound. The alien screamed, but Sarah remained focused, her movements steady. Minutes felt like hours, but finally, the bleeding stopped. The injured soldier's breathing stabilized. Sarah leaned back, wiping sweat from her brow. She looked up at Xylar, who observed her with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. You've saved one of my men, Xylar said. But don't think this earns you trust. You're still my prisoner. Sarah met his gaze, her voice steady despite her fear. I didn't do it for your trust. I did it because he needed help. Xylar's expression remained unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Respect, perhaps. Before he could respond, alarms blared through the ship. A soldier rushed in, his voice urgent. General, a rival faction is approaching. They're armed and closing in fast. Xylar turned to his crew, barking orders to prepare for battle. As chaos erupted around her, Sarah realized she was caught in the middle of an alien war. Her survival instincts kicked in. She wasn't just a prisoner. She was a human surrounded by enemies, each moment a test of her will and ingenuity. Stay here, Sylar ordered, his tone sharp as he glanced at her. "If you attempt to escape, you'll be dealt with." But Sarah wasn't planning to run. She had a front row seat to the inner workings of the Zygorian Empire, and she intended to use it. What she didn't know was that her decision to save one life had set in motion a chain of events that would change the fate of two species forever. The general's unbreakable vow. The ship rocked violently as enemy fire hammered its shields. General Sylar stood at the center of the command deck, barking orders to his crew. His voice, sharp and commanding, cut through the chaos. The Zygorian warship was under siege by a rival faction, the Caltrex, who had been waiting for an opportunity to strike. Sarah, confined to a corner of the command deck, clutched the wall for balance. She watched the crew scramble, their movements swift but tense. The alarms were deafening, and the ship's energy core emitted a low hum that made the air feel heavy. Her instincts screamed at her to stay out of the way, but her eyes kept darting to the wounded soldiers who had been abandoned in the chaos. Sylar noticed her restless gaze and strode toward her. "You look uneasy, human. Do not mistake this for an opportunity to escape. I'm uneasy because your men are dying." Sarah shot back, her voice steady despite the growing tension. "If you want them to fight for you, they need to survive first." Sylar's eyes narrowed, a faint flicker of intrigue crossing his face. "You speak as if you care about their lives. Strange for a human, considering we're your enemy." "I'm a medic," she said, her tone firm. "Lives are lives, no matter whose side they're on." For a moment, Sylar seemed to consider her words. The ship shook again, more violently this time, and a console nearby exploded in a shower of sparks. A Zygorian officer cried out, clutching his burnt arm. Without hesitation, Sarah moved toward him, ignoring the stunned stares of the crew. "What are you doing?" Sylar demanded. "Saving his life," Sarah replied curtly. She knelt beside the injured officer, using a scrap of fabric from her sleeve to stem the bleeding. "If you want to win this fight, you need everyone at their best. Let me do my job." Sylar hesitated, his pride battling with his logic. Finally, he signaled to the soldiers around him. "Let her work, but watch her closely." As Sarah tended to the wounded, the tide of the battle began to shift. The Caltrex ships were relentless, their attacks growing more coordinated. Sylar realized the situation was dire. Its ship couldn't hold out much longer. He turned to his second-in-command, Commander Vorak, whose disdain for Sarah was evident in his every glare. "Vorak, deploy the strike fleet," Sylar ordered. "We'll lure them into a trap." Vorak hesitated, his eyes flicking toward Sarah. "General, with respect, this human is a liability. She's manipulating you." Sylar's voice turned icy. "She saved one of our own and is doing so again. Question my judgment again, and you'll answer for it." Vorak stepped back, clearly unsettled. Sylar's loyalty to his crew was unwavering, but this was the first time anyone had seen him extend it to an outsider. As the battle raged on, Sarah finished stabilizing the injured officer and stood, brushing her hands on her pants. "He'll live, but he needs proper treatment once this is over." Sylar approached her, his towering form casting a shadow over her. "You've proven useful, human, but make no mistake. Your life hangs by a thread. If you betray us, I'll end you myself." Sarah met his gaze without flinching. "Then I guess I'd better not betray you." A sudden explosion rocked the ship, throwing everyone off balance. Sylar caught Sarah by the arm, steadying her before she could fall. His grip was firm but not cruel, and for a fleeting moment, their eyes met. There was something unspoken in his gaze, a mixture of respect and confusion. Before either could speak, a crew member shouted, "The enemy flagship is targeting our core. If they hit it, we're finished." Sylar's jaw tightened. "All hands, prepare for emergency maneuvers. Brace for impact." Sarah, still standing close to him, couldn't help but speak up. "You're the general. If you go down, your crew loses its leader. You need a backup plan." Sylar turned to her, his expression unreadable. "And what do you suggest, human?" "Let me help," she said, surprising even herself. "I know I'm not one of you, but I can think on my feet. Give me a chance." The crew murmured in disbelief, but Sylar silenced them with a raised hand. "No one touches her," he declared, his voice ringing with finality. "She's under my protection." The room fell silent. Even Sarah was taken aback by his words. Sylar continued, his gaze locked on her. "You've earned a small measure of trust. Do not squander it." Sarah nodded, her mind racing. She wasn't sure what had prompted Sylar to make such a bold declaration, but she knew one thing. This was her chance to prove herself, and perhaps find a way to survive this nightmare. As the ship hurtled toward its next encounter, the unlikely alliance between a human medic and an alien general began to take shape. But in the shadows, Vorek's resentment simmered, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. Betrayal within the ranks. The Zygorian warship drifted in temporary silence, its battered hull glowing faintly as repair drones worked tirelessly. Inside, the crew regrouped, patching themselves up and running diagnostics. The battle with the Caltrex fleet had left them shaken but victorious. Barely. Dr. Sarah Lorne sat in a dimly lit corner of the infirmary, her hands trembling slightly as she cleaned her tools. The metallic tang of alien blood still clung to the air. She'd saved 3 more Zygorian lives during the chaos, but her exhaustion was catching up. Sleep wasn't an option. She was still an outsider, her every move scrutinized. The infirmary door slid open, and Commander Vorek entered, his heavy boots echoing ominously. His sharp eyes darted to Sarah, narrowing as if she were a stain on his pristine ship. He strode past the injured without a glance, his focus solely on her. "You think you've earned a place here, human." Vorek's voice was a low growl, dripping with disdain. "Saving a few lives doesn't make you one of us." Sarah didn't look up, her voice steady. "I'm not trying to be one of you. I'm just doing what needs to be done." Vorek leaned closer, his shadow looming over her. "Don't mistake the General's mercy for acceptance. You're a liability, and I won't let you endanger this crew." Before Sarah could respond, the door hissed open again, and General Sylar entered, his imposing presence silencing the room. His yellow eyes flicked between Vorek and Sarah, the tension palpable. "Commander," Sylar said coldly, "is there a reason you're harassing someone under my protection?" Vorek straightened, masking his resentment behind a stiff salute. "General, I was merely reminding the human of her place." Her place," Sylar interrupted, his voice like a blade, "is exactly where I decided to be. Do you question my judgment?" Vorek's jaw tightened, but he shook his head. "No, General." "Good. Return to your duties," Sylar ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. Vorek shot Sarah a venomous glare before storming out. Once he was gone, Sylar turned to her, his expression unreadable. "You attract trouble, human." Sarah met his gaze. "Trouble seems to find me, whether I want it or not." A faint smirk tugged at the corner of Sylar's mouth, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Rest while you can. The Caltrex won't stay quiet for long." As Sylar left, Sarah exhaled, the weight of the encounter settling over her. She couldn't shake the feeling that Vorek's hatred wasn't just personal, it was dangerous. Meanwhile, seeds of betrayal. In a hidden chamber deep within the ship, Vorek met with a handful of loyalists, their faces hardened with resolve. The room was dimly lit, the only illumination coming from the flickering holographic displays of the Zygorian Empire's insignia. "This human is a threat," Vorek began, pacing before the group. "She's worming her way into the General's trust, and he's letting her. It's unacceptable." One of the soldiers, a burly Zygorian with a scar across his face, nodded. "The General has changed since she arrived." He's hesitating. "That's not the Sylar we followed into battle." Vorek slammed his fist on the table. "Exactly. If we don't act, she'll compromise our mission and our survival." Another soldier hesitated before speaking, but she saved lives, including mine. Maybe she's not. Vorik cut him off with a sharp glare. She's manipulating you, fool. Humans are cunning. They play on your emotions to weaken you. The room fell silent as Vorik leaned in, his voice low and menacing. We must take matters into our own hands. If the general won't see reason, we'll make him. The trap. The following day, Sarah was called to assist with a malfunction in the ship's medical systems. She arrived at the maintenance bay, only to find it eerily quiet. Something felt off. She cautiously stepped inside, her hand brushing against the wall for reassurance. Suddenly, the doors slammed shut behind her, and the lights dimmed. Vorik stepped out from the shadows, flanked by his loyalists. His expression was triumphant, his voice dripping with malice. You should have stayed on your doomed planet, human, he sneered. Now you'll pay for meddling where you don't belong. Sarah's heart raced, but she forced herself to remain calm. If you kill me, you'll be defying your general's orders. Do you really think that will end well for you? Vorik chuckled darkly. Xylar won't know until it's too late, and by then, we'll make him see how dangerous you really are. He gestured to one of his men, who activated a console. A holographic feed showed the ship's energy core. Vorik smirked. You see, we're not just getting rid of you. We're creating a crisis, one that you'll conveniently be blamed for. Sarah's mind raced. They were planning to sabotage the ship and frame her. She needed to think fast. You're risking everyone's lives, she said, stalling for time. Your crew, your mission, everything. Vorik shrugged. Sacrifices must be made for the greater good. Before he could give the order, the doors burst open, and Xylar stormed in, his blade drawn. His eyes blazed with fury as he took in the scene. What is the meaning of this? Vorik froze, his confidence crumbling. General, Silence. Xylar roared, his voice echoing through the chamber. You dare defy me. Sarah took the opportunity to step away from Vorik, her breathing shaky. Xylar's gaze softened briefly as he glanced at her, ensuring she was unharmed, before turning his full wrath on Vorik. You've betrayed not only me but this entire crew, Xylar said, his tone deadly. You've crossed a line that cannot be forgiven. Vorik's loyalists began to back away, their resolve faltering. General, we only. Xylar raised his blade, cutting him off. No one touches her. No one defies me. Your actions have sealed your fate. The general's dark past. The Zygorian warship glided through the cold expanse of space, its battered hull reflecting the faint light of distant stars. The crew was subdued, the tension from Vorik's betrayal still lingering. Sarah, however, found herself restless. She had earned Xylar's protection, but the weight of her position was suffocating. Every step she took on the alien vessel felt like walking a tightrope, with enemies waiting for her to slip. Her unease grew when Xylar himself appeared at the infirmary door. His towering figure filled the entryway, his golden armor gleaming under the dim lights. He gestured for her to follow. Come with me, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Sarah hesitated but complied, falling into step behind him. He led her through the winding corridors, away from the bustling crew and into the quieter, more secure sections of the ship. The walls here were adorned with ancient Zygorian symbols, their meaning lost on Sarah, but carrying a weight she could feel. Where are we going? She finally asked, breaking the silence. Xylar glanced at her, his expression unreadable. You've seen much of this ship, but not the truth of why we're here. It's time you understood. The Hall of Memories. They arrived at a sealed chamber, the massive door etched with intricate designs that seemed to glow faintly as Xylar placed his hand against it. The door slid open, revealing a vast, circular room filled with holographic projections. Images of Zygorian warriors, battles, and monuments floated in the air, each one telling a story. Sarah stepped inside, her eyes wide. What is this place? Xylar walked to the center of the room, where a large console hummed with energy. The Hall of Memories. It holds the history of my people, including my own. He activated the console, and the projection shifted, focusing on a single figure, Xylar himself. Sarah watched as the images told a story of glory, betrayal, and pain. This, Xylar began, his voice quieter than she'd ever heard it, is what they don't tell you in the Empire's tales of conquest. I was once a revered leader on Zegur, celebrated for my victories. But when I began questioning the Council's endless thirst for war, I became a liability. The projection showed Xylar standing before the Zagorian Council, their faces stern and unyielding. He was stripped of his titles and exiled, sent to the outer edges of the galaxy to lead a war he no longer believed in. They called it a promotion. Xylar continued, bitterness creeping into his voice. In reality, it was a sentence. To lead a doomed fleet in a war against your kind. A punishment disguised as duty. Sarah felt a pang of empathy she hadn't expected. They betrayed you. Xylar nodded, his fists clenched. They feared me. Feared that I could see what they refused to admit, that this war serves no purpose but their own greed. They sent me here to die. The confession. For a moment, silence filled the chamber, broken only by the faint hum of the holograms. Sarah stepped closer, her voice tentative. If you don't believe in this war, why are you still fighting it? Xylar's gaze hardened. Because I have no choice. My fleet depends on me, and my honor demands that I protect them, even if it means carrying out orders I despise. Sarah studied him, her mind racing. She had seen glimpses of humanity in Xylar before, but now she understood the depth of his conflict. He wasn't the unyielding war machine she had assumed. He was a man caught between duty and his own conscience. You don't have to follow their path, she said softly. You've already proven you're capable of more than blind loyalty. Protecting me, stopping Vorik, those were your choices. Xylar's eyes locked onto hers, the intensity of his gaze making her breath catch. And what would you suggest, human? That I betray my people for yours? That I throw away what little honor I have left? I'm saying you have the power to end this cycle, Sarah replied, her voice firm. To make a choice that changes everything, for both our species. For a long moment, Xylar said nothing. Then he turned back to the console, deactivating the holograms. You speak with the confidence of someone who hasn't seen what I've seen. But perhaps you're not entirely wrong. A test of trust. As they left the Hall of Memories, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she had planted a seed in Xylar's mind. But trust was a fragile thing, and she knew it could be shattered at any moment. She didn't expect it to be tested so soon. When they returned to the command deck, a transmission from the Zagorian Council awaited them. The holographic figures of the council members loomed over the crew, their voices cold and authoritative. General Xylar, one of them began, we have received reports of unusual behavior aboard your vessel. A human prisoner granted special privileges. Dissension among your officers. Explain yourself. Xylar's jaw tightened, but he remained composed. The human is a medic. Her skills have proven invaluable in maintaining the efficiency of my crew. Invaluable. The council member sneered. You are here to destroy humanity, not rely on it. This deviation from your mission is unacceptable. Sarah stood silently at Xylar's side, her heart pounding. She could see the conflict in his expression, the weight of his choices pressing down on him. I lead this fleet, Xylar said finally, his voice steady. I will do what is necessary to ensure our victory. Do not question my methods. The council's holograms flickered, their disapproval evident. Ensure that you do, General, for your sake. As the transmission ended, the command deck fell silent. Xylar turned to Sarah, his face unreadable. You've seen what I'm up against. The question is, human, are you ready to face it with me? Earth's last hope, The ship's cold metal walls seemed to close in around Sarah as she sat in her small quarters, staring at the communicator device she had hidden in her medkit. It was old and barely functional, but it was all she had, a lifeline to Earth. After the confrontation with the Zygorian Council, she knew time was running out. General Xylar's defiance wouldn't go unpunished, and if the Council deemed him a liability, they'd send reinforcements to take control of the fleet and finish their mission to destroy humanity. Her hands shook as she activated the communicator. The signal was weak, crackling with static, but it connected. A faint voice came through, garbled but unmistakably human. "This is Earth Command. Identify yourself." Sarah's heart raced. She hadn't heard a human voice in weeks. "This is Dr. Sarah Lorne, transmitting from the Zygorian warship Relentless. I don't have much time. The fleet is planning a final assault on Earth. I've learned their weaknesses, but I need extraction." The voice on the other end grew more urgent. "Dr. Lorne, you're alive. We thought. Never mind. Send us the data you have. We'll prepare our defenses." Sarah hesitated. She glanced at the door, half expecting it to slide open and reveal Xylar standing there. "I'll send it, but there's something you need to know. The General, Xylar, he's not what we thought. He doesn't want this war." There was a pause. Then, a skeptical reply. "He's the leader of their fleet, Dr. Lorne. You're telling us he's suddenly an ally?" "No," she admitted. "Not yet, but he's questioning their orders. I think he could be convinced to stand down, or even fight alongside us." The voice on the other end sounded incredulous. "You're risking everything on the hope that an alien general might change sides. Dr. Lorne, we can't trust them." "I'm not asking you to trust him," Sarah said firmly. "I'm asking you to trust me." The line went silent for a moment before the voice returned. "Understood. Send the data. And Dr. Lorne, be careful." As the connection ended, Sarah quickly uploaded the fleet's vulnerabilities, shield frequencies, weapon blind spots, and the locations of critical systems. But as she shut down the communicator, a shadow loomed over her. She turned to see Xylar standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Caught in the act. You're braver than I gave you credit for, human," Xylar said, his voice calm but carrying an edge that sent chills down Sarah's spine. "Do you realize what would happen if my crew discovered you transmitting to Earth?" Sarah swallowed hard, her mind racing. "I wasn't planning an attack. I was warning them, giving them a chance to defend themselves." Xylar stepped inside, the door hissing shut behind him. "And what did you tell them about me?" "That you're not the monster they think you are," she said without hesitation. "That you could be the key to ending this war." Xylar's gaze softened, but only slightly. "You gamble with lives, Sarah, both theirs and yours. Do you think your people will see me as anything but an enemy?" "I think they'll see what I see," she said, stepping closer. "A leader who's tired of being a pawn in someone else's game." The room fell silent as Xylar studied her. Finally, he spoke. "You may believe in me, but my people will not. The Council will crush us both if they learn what you've done." "Then don't give them the chance," Sarah said, her voice firm. "Help me stop this fleet before it reaches Earth. You have the power to change the course of this war." Xylar turned away, his shoulders tense. "Do you know what you're asking? Betraying my people, my fleet. It would mean death for us both." Sarah placed a hand on his arm, surprising them both. "You said you wanted to protect your crew. The only way to do that is to end this war." The Council's move. As if on cue, the ship's intercom crackled to life. "General Xylar, report to the command deck immediately. Incoming transmission from the Council." Xylar's jaw tightened, and without a word, he turned and strode out of the room. Sarah followed at a distance, her heart pounding. When they reached the command deck, the holograms of the Zygorian Council were already waiting, their faces stern and unyielding. "General Xylar," the lead counselor began, "we have received disturbing reports. Your fleet has failed to deliver the decisive blow against the humans. Worse, we hear whispers of dissent among your officers. Explain yourself. Thylar stood tall, his voice steady. The Caltrex ambush delayed us. The fleet is regrouping, and I will personally ensure the mission is completed. The counselor's gaze narrowed. And what of the human aboard your ship? This medic. Why is she still alive? Sarah's breath caught, but Thylar didn't hesitate. Her skills have proven useful. She has saved the lives of several officers, ensuring the fleet remains combat-ready. The counselor's expression darkened. A human's usefulness is irrelevant. She is an enemy and a threat. You are ordered to execute her immediately. The command deck fell silent. Sarah's eyes darted to Thylar, her chest tightening. He turned to the council, his voice cold. If I am to carry out this mission, I must do so without interference. Questioning my methods undermines my authority. The counselor leaned forward, their hologram flickering. Do not forget your place, Thylar. Complete your mission, or we will find someone who will. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the crew in tense silence. Thylar's gaze lingered on the now empty holographic space before he turned to his officers. Prepare the fleet. We move in 2 hours. As the crew dispersed, Thylar approached Sarah, his voice low. You've put me in an impossible position, human. Sarah met his gaze, her voice steady. Sometimes the impossible is the only way forward. The final stand. The Zygorian warship, relentless, prepared for its next move. The crew bustled around the command deck, each officer executing Thylar's orders with precision. The fleet was positioned just outside Earth's solar system, ready to launch the final assault. The tension was palpable, and even the most seasoned warriors felt the weight of what was about to happen. Sarah stood in the shadows, her heart pounding as she watched the alien crew. She had never felt so small or so important. Thylar's reluctant protection had kept her alive, but now she was part of a far greater gamble. The future of Earth depended on her next move, and Thylar's decision to trust her. Thylar's voice boomed across the deck. Fleet, prepare to engage. All systems at maximum readiness. Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady but urgent. Thylar, wait. The entire crew turned to her, their expressions ranging from disbelief to hostility. No one spoke to the general like that, especially not a human. Thylar's golden eyes locked onto hers, a mixture of curiosity and irritation flickering in them. This isn't the way, Sarah continued, her voice unwavering. You know it's not. If you go through with this, you're only serving the council's agenda. They don't care about you, your crew, or anyone else. They'll discard you the moment you're no longer useful. Thylar stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. What do you suggest, human? That I betray my people? That I defy the council and doom my crew to their wrath? I'm suggesting you make your own choice, Sarah said firmly. One that isn't dictated by fear or blind loyalty. You've seen what this war has done to your people and mine. It doesn't have to end this way. The ambush. Before Thylar could respond, the ship's alarms blared, cutting through the tense silence. A lieutenant rushed to the general's side, his voice urgent. General, we're under attack. Caltrex ships have appeared on our flank. They're targeting our rear defenses. Thylar barked orders to his crew. Engage defensive formations. Protect the core at all costs. Sarah felt the ship lurch as it maneuvered to face the new threat. On the holographic display, the Caltrex fleet swarmed like a pack of wolves, their smaller, faster ships darting around the larger Zygorian vessels. It was clear they had been waiting for the perfect moment to strike. This isn't a coincidence, Sarah said, her voice cutting through the chaos. The council sent them, didn't they? Thylar's jaw tightened. It's possible. They've always had contingencies in place. If they see me as a threat. He stopped himself, unwilling to admit the full scope of the betrayal. Sarah placed a hand on his arm, her tone urgent. You need to act now. The Council doesn't care about your crew. They'll sacrifice everyone to maintain control. But if you stand with me, we can stop this." Xylar's gaze flicked to the holographic display, then back to Sarah. For the first time, doubt crept into his voice. "And what makes you think your people would ever accept an alliance with me?" "Because they trust me," Sarah said, meeting his eyes. "And I trust you." The general's choice. The Caltrex ships pressed their attack, their weapons hammering the Zygorian fleet's defenses. Xylar clenched his fists, his mind racing. The Council had made their intentions clear. He was expendable. His fleet was expendable. Everything he had fought for was a lie. Finally, he made his decision. Turning to his officers, he issued a command that shocked everyone on the deck. "Redirect all power to the forward shields. Open a channel to the Caltrex flagship." The crew hesitated, confused. One brave officer stepped forward. "General, are you suggesting?" "Do it." Xylar snapped, his voice brooking no argument. Moments later, the holographic display shifted to show the Caltrex commander. A smug grin plastered across his reptilian face. "Ah, Xylar," he sneered. "I was wondering when you'd realize your place in the Council's plans." Xylar's expression was cold, his voice like steel. "You've made a mistake coming here, Caltrex. My fleet and I are no longer pawns of the Council." The Caltrex commander laughed. "Brave words, but you're outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender, and perhaps I'll spare a few of your crew." Xylar's response was immediate. "You misunderstand. I'm not surrendering. I'm fighting back." Before the Caltrex could respond, Xylar barked another order to his crew. "Fire all weapons at the Caltrex flagship. Target their engines and weapon systems. Make it count." The deck erupted into chaos as the Relentless launched a devastating volley of firepower. The Caltrex flagship reeled under the assault, its shields flickering before failing entirely. A series of explosions rippled across its hull, and the remaining Caltrex ships began to retreat. A fragile alliance. As the smoke cleared and the Zygorian fleet regrouped, Xylar turned to Sarah. "The Caltrex are dealt with, but the Council won't stop. They'll send more fleets." "Then we need to act quickly," Sarah said. "I've already sent Earth the information they need to defend themselves. But if we're going to stop this war, we need to take down the Council's control systems, cut them off at the source." Xylar nodded slowly, his resolve hardening. "You realize what you're asking of me, human. To betray everything I've ever known." "You're not betraying your people," Sarah said softly. "You're saving them." For the first time, Xylar allowed himself a small smile. "Very well. But if we fail, I will hold you accountable." Sarah smiled back, a flicker of hope sparking in her chest. "Fair enough." The Relentless adjusted its course, heading not for Earth, but for the Zygorian homeworld. Xylar and Sarah stood side by side on the command deck, united by a fragile alliance and a shared goal: to end the war before it consumed them all. A new alliance. The Zygorian warship, Relentless, cut through the vast darkness of space on a course that would change the fate of two species. The Zygorian homeworld loomed ahead, a stark, swirling mass of purple storms and metallic cities. It was both beautiful and menacing, a symbol of the Empire's iron grip over its people and the galaxy. On the command deck, General Xylar stood at the center, his expression grim. The decision to return to Zygor and confront the Council was a gamble, one that could cost him everything. His fleet, his crew, and even his life hung in the balance. Beside him, Sarah Lorne watched the holographic display of the planet growing larger with every passing second. "You're sure about this?" Xylar asked, his voice low but steady. Sarah nodded, her gaze unwavering. "If we don't take down the Council, this war will never end. They'll keep sending fleets, keep destroying lives. We have to try." Xylar turned to his crew, his golden eyes sweeping across their faces. Some were loyal, willing to follow him into the unknown. Others were hesitant, their fear of the Council evident. He straightened, his voice commanding the room. Today, we stand not as tools of the Council, but as beings who refuse to be controlled. The human beside me, he gestured to Sarah, has shown us another way. A way to end the bloodshed. But it will require courage, loyalty, and sacrifice. The crew exchanged glances before one officer, the same one Sarah had saved during the Caltrex ambush, stepped forward. We follow you, General. To the end. A murmur of agreement spread through the room. Xylar gave a single nod, the weight of their decision settling on his shoulders. Prepare for descent. Activate the stealth systems. We're going in. The infiltration. The Relentless descended through Zyger's turbulent atmosphere, its stealth systems masking its presence. Xylar had chosen a landing site far from the central cities, a barren wasteland of jagged rocks and swirling winds. From there, they would make their way to the Council's stronghold, a fortified citadel known as the Spire. Sarah stood at the edge of the ship's hangar, staring out at the desolate landscape. The air was thick with an electric charge, and the distant glow of the spire was a reminder of how dangerous this mission was. Xylar approached her, his armored boots clinking softly against the metal floor. You're quiet. Just thinking, Sarah replied, about how insane this is. Xylar allowed a small smirk. Insanity and bravery are often the same thing. The two led a small team of loyal Zagorian soldiers, each armed with advanced weaponry. As they moved through the wasteland, Sarah couldn't help but marvel at the alien planet's harsh beauty. The rocks pulsed faintly with an inner glow, and the sky churned with violent storms. Stay close, Xylar said, his voice cutting through her thoughts. The spire's outer defenses are automated. One wrong step, and you'll be vaporized. Sarah swallowed hard and followed his lead. The spire. Reaching the spire's entrance was no small feat. They had evaded patrols, disarmed traps, and bypassed surveillance drones. Now, standing before the massive gates, Sarah felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Xylar gestured to one of his soldiers, who began hacking into the spire's security systems. The gates groaned open, revealing a labyrinth of corridors bathed in cold, artificial light. This is where it gets dangerous, Xylar said, turning to Sarah. Stay close, and don't hesitate if you have to fight. Sarah nodded, clutching the small blaster he had given her. It felt foreign in her hands, but she wasn't about to back down. As they moved deeper into the spire, alarms began to blare. The Council had detected their presence. Armed guards flooded the corridors, their weapons glowing ominously. Xylar led the charge, his blade slicing through enemies with deadly precision. Sarah stayed behind him, using her medical knowledge to tend to the wounded soldiers as they pressed forward. Confronting the Council, the team reached the central chamber of the spire, a vast, domed room with a high ceiling that seemed to hum with energy. At its center stood the Council, their holographic forms projected from elevated platforms. They were larger than life, their faces cold and unfeeling. General Xylar, one of them sneered, "You've returned, and you've brought a human. How quaint." Xylar stepped forward, his voice booming. "Your reign ends today. You've betrayed your people, using them as pawns in your endless war. No more." The Council laughed, their voices echoing ominously. "You've grown soft, Xylar. This is why you were sent to the edges of the galaxy, to rid us of your weakness. But now you've brought your treachery to our doorstep. For that, you will die." The chamber erupted into chaos as automated turrets emerged from the walls, firing relentlessly. Xylar and his team fought back, but the Council had anticipated their arrival. Sarah took cover, her heart racing, as she tried to find a way to disable the defenses. Then she saw it, a terminal glowing faintly at the edge of the room. If she could access it, she might be able to shut down the turrets. She darted across the battlefield, dodging fire as she reached the console. Her hands flew over the alien interface, her heart pounding as she deciphered the symbols. Come on, she muttered, sweat dripping down her face. Finally, the turrets powered down. Xylar seized the opportunity, leading his soldiers in a final charge against the Council's guards. The holographic figures flickered as their control systems were destroyed. A new beginning. When the battle ended, the chamber was in ruins. The Council's holograms fizzled out, their control over the fleet severed. Xylar stood amidst the wreckage, his chest heaving as he surveyed the scene. "It's over," Sarah said, stepping beside him. "For now," Xylar replied. "The Council is gone, but the damage they've done won't be undone so easily." Sarah placed a hand on his arm. "You've taken the first step. That's what matters." Xylar turned to her, a rare softness in his gaze. "And what of you, human? Will your people see this as a victory or a betrayal?" "They'll see it as hope," Sarah said firmly. "And maybe, so will yours." The Relentless broadcasted a message across the galaxy, a call for peace. Sarah and Xylar stood together as symbols of what could be achieved when two enemies chose to fight for something greater than themselves. The war was over, but the alliance they had forged was just beginning.